trying to stop Hillary's presidential plans. Best-selling author Ed Klein has the latest details on Midpoint with Ed Berliner. Go now to NewsmaxTV.
A lot goes into the election of a political candidate. Time, sweat, campaigning, money. Let me say that again for those who may have missed it. Money. And we live in a time where the amount of those dollars is getting greater every election cycle. But see, there's a catch. Where the money is coming from and where it's not coming from. You see, it's a man's world here, and that deserves some real discussion here as to why that is. Welcome back to Midpoint. The Director of Health Policy at the Independent Women's Forum, Hadley Heath Manning, joins us once again. Hadley, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I was not really totally shocked when I saw this, but the disparity is what caught me. That there is so much more money that is being given to political campaigns by male donors than women, and there so many people are now trying to find a reason for this. We're getting into 30, 40, 50,000 different reasons. From your perspective now, why is that?
Well, you know, I work at the Independent Women's Forum, which is a women's organization. We're involved with public policy, so we have firsthand experience with this, not just on the donor side, but on the fundraising side. So what it boils down to basically is this, Ed, there are significant gender differences when it comes to all aspects of life, but specifically when it comes to writing that check for a political candidate or for a political organization. Women interact with the system differently. And we've got to begin to acknowledge that. I believe we are beginning to acknowledge that in the way we do fundraising, the way we speak to women about politics. And on the conservative side, you know, conservatives and Republicans in general, the philosophy is it's an individual first. We don't like group politics. We don't like identity politics. We don't like gender pandering when it comes to politics. But that's not the same thing as recognizing that women hear messages differently. They want to donate to things differently, and they don't want to be, this is very important, women don't want to be a sort of an accessory or sideline to what have traditionally been called women's issues. Women want to be involved with all of the issues. That's why we at IWF say that all issues are women's issues.
Are we still not? And again, I think you hit on it right there, that many women still see a lot of the political donors and a lot of the political fat cats, if you will, still treating them as ladies, can we talk to you? Ladies, can we do this? When, in essence, you have the woman of today who is a businesswoman, who is just as much on the CEO trail as anybody else, and she's almost gotten maybe a little bit feisty, maybe, who just says, look, wait a minute, I'm just as much as any guy, treat me exactly like that, and that's what they want, but it still seems as if the parties haven't gotten that yet, correct?
That's true, Ed, and I will say, as a woman, sometimes I find it quite offensive, actually, to put women's issues in a small box in the corner and limit women's interests in politics to a couple of issues, whether it's abortion or reproductive rights. Those issues are very important to women, but so are other issues that you mentioned, like the economy. Women have increasingly entered the workforce. Women comprise the majority of consumers, spend the majority of consumer dollars, make the majority of consumer decisions for themselves and their households. So the economy is definitely an issue that women want to hear more about. And when it comes to participating, you know, in the political sphere, there are many women's organizations on the right and on the left, but it's worth recognizing that traditionally the left has been ahead on this. They have a Goliath, it seems, when it comes to political fundraising for those women's groups. Emily's List, the National Organization for Women. I could go on and name dozens of groups on the left that advocate for women in politics and for those issues that I described as women's issues. But the right is catching up, and I believe we've got something right in our recipe when we want to talk to women about all of the issues. We want to invite them into the broader conversation about politics, but that doesn't mean that we speak to women as if they were men. We can recognize that women communicate differently, and women have different ways of going about things because of our intrinsic gender differences. That's not the same as gender pandering or limiting, again, those issues to just a few.
So then what is the right? You just said the left is doing it better. What is the right then not doing? What are they missing here?
Well, I think we have to recognize, again, that communication is important, that we do message testing at IWF to make sure that what we're saying resonates with the majority of mainstream American women. We don't want to try to have a conversation on the left's terms, but go directly to the real-life experience of American women when it comes to all of the issues that we advocate for. So putting things in different language, in different terms, making different arguments, those are things that we can do to reach wider parts of the electorate, including women. We don't always have to stick to the script or stick to the talking points. There are a lot of reasons, good reasons, to argue in favor of limited government, and they don't all have to do with the number of jobs that are created or destroyed, but they have to do with improving people's lives and giving you and your family a better quality of life. So sometimes it just comes down to, Ed, making those alternative arguments to increase the number of people who will listen or who will hear the arguments that we're making. And on the fundraising side, I mean, the women's groups on the left are an intrinsic part of the left's movement. The left really has invited women's groups to the center of what they do when they talk about this war on women rhetoric. They're using it in states across the country and elections across the country. And on the right, I think, again, there's a hesitancy to treat women as different in politics because it doesn't want to be, we don't want to misconstrue our intentions as discriminatory. We don't believe in, again, group identities, but we see people as individuals. We can do that. We can honor the individuality of women by still at least acknowledging that there are differences in the way we communicate, the way that we hear political messages, and the way that we hear issues of public policy being discussed. And I think that that's the right track moving forward. Not pandering, but better, more selective, more targeting messaging for different groups of people. And it doesn't have to be because we think that they're different in a lesser way, but they're different in an equal way.
Now, here's a couple of things that perhaps the right is missing out on, and the left is doing a little bit better here. A couple of things that you take from this. It talks about here, certainly, that women want more of a personal touch. They want more of a relationship with the candidate, better understanding of where the donations are going. Fair to say a lot of times guys don't really ask where the money is going. They just hand over the dollars. And it says here, women expect to attend the same events as their male counterparts, not tease or, and I'm going to use, you can't see me, but I'm going to use the famous air quotes, women's events, which is what everybody puts in here. Are those two things that still the right hasn't quite gotten yet, and that maybe that comes from just an old male line of thinking?
I do think it's disappointing to see sometimes the right can put women into a women's auxiliary, or they see them as an auxiliary part of the movement for conservative government, when women are actually in many ways at the forefront of arguing for limited government. We see a lot of organizations headed by women who aren't traditionally women's organizations and aren't focused on those traditional women's issues, but they're focused on a much broader array of issues. So yes, I agree that we shouldn't sideline women when it comes to talking about them as a part of the conservative movement, and we certainly shouldn't be separating women out of the mainstream. I saw an effort actually in the last election cycle to try to get women involved. It was an effort started within the Republican Party, but unfortunately they were starting this effort with only 14 weeks left until the election, and you may think that that's a long period of time, but it really takes years to build relationships and to gain the trust of women who may be your donors, maybe your supporters, and they support your ideas. This is a long-term, long-run effort. It's not something that we can start up and reboot every election cycle, but it's something we have to talk to women about, the values that we support and government and public policy throughout the years, and never let up just because it's not an election year, or because it's out of the news cycle.
All right, a couple minutes I got left here, and this comes up immediately because there's a discussion process. It may be women are just disenchanted. Maybe there's some apathy here. Maybe there's something else about the political process that goes on here. I have heard women, very powerful women, tell me, Ed, honest to God, I don't throw a lot of money in there because it's still an old boy network. And there are those three words that we have heard now for decades. And there's people in the Republican Party who will tell you, wait a minute, we're getting away from that. That's an old way of thinking. But is it fair to say that that is still the perception that's out there from women?
I believe that a lot of women would recognize an old boys network in certain industries, or when it comes to politics or political fundraising. But that's never going to change if women continue to sit out of the game. So I would encourage women, especially if there are many women like men who are discouraged with the state of our country, and maybe they're discouraged by the approach that both parties are taking, but the only way we're going to change directions right now, the direction we're headed in is more and bigger government. If we're ever going to change directions, then it takes all of our support, not just financial resources, but in the time and the volunteerism that we do in our communities and the way that we support candidates at the very basic volunteer and grassroots level. Women can get involved, and women are involved. Even if there is a gap in terms of participation in donor activities, or in the top 10, top 20 donors on the male and female side, women are very heavily involved at the grassroots level, and they're They're giving up their time, they're involved in their neighborhoods, and they're advocating for the issues that will ultimately bring our country back in the right direction.
But about 30 seconds I have left here. What you're intimating here is that women still need to get out there. They still need to be a lot more forceful. And if they want change, they can't sit back and wait for somebody to make the change for them. Just like any other good movement, they need to be out in front of it.
That's right, and I'm afraid that the left using this war on women rhetoric may discourage some conservative women from speaking out and saying, hey, listen, I am a woman, and I am conservative, and I have a voice. Just because the left is trumpeting louder that they believe they're the party of women, that doesn't make it true. And sometimes repeating something over and over again loudly just suggests that the left is protesting too much. They aren't really the party of women's interests. If you look at the way women have fared in the economy over the past 6, 8, 10 years, women need to change just like men do, and they're interested in that broad array of issues and turning the country around.
Don't let them drown you out, just like anything else. Make sure you get in there and fight as well. Hadley, Heath Manning, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Let's do it again soon.
Thank you.
All right. There's the note right there. You want something done, get out and do it, just like everything else in life. Next up, Senator Marco Rubio goes one